Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Versus Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because aboard the mothership is Stephen Graham Jones. He's the writer of Earthdivers from IDW Publishing. Now join us as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Jones. Thank you so much for coming to the Versus Stars podcast.
Man, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I always ask a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for writing and who your earliest influences?
Earliest influences, man, it's probably a combination of Louis L'Amour, the Western novelist, and whoever was writing Conan the Barbarian in the 80s. That's probably Robert Jordan. And Spider-Man, I'm not even like everybody who was writing Spider-Man in the 80s. He was my go-to, Yeah.
So I read something interesting about you, and I'm not sure exactly what it means. So you're gonna have to explain it to me and my listeners.
Yeah.
You are the Ivena Baldwin Professor of English at the University of Colorado Boulder. So yeah. I've never seen Ivena Baldwin at the head of a title before. So what is that all about?
A lot of professors who have been in the game a while will get a name in front of their name like that, and what that means is you're an endowed chair, which means that some really successful person has donated a big chunk of money to the university and their name is associated with it. And so the fund, like the kind of the interest that big chunk of money generates pays for a lot of my salary. And therefore, because I'm kind of coming out of that fund, that name attaches to me. Like, so it was Ivena Riley Baldwin, I believe, who made that donation many years ago. And it was earmarked for somebody in the humanities, or I believe, and I'm the person who got it. So I'm now the Ivena Baldwin Chair of English.
So how does it feel to be a representative of not only a chair, or let's say of for English, but an individual person as well?
Oh, I mean, it's a huge honor, of course. And I guess I also here at CU at University of Colorado Boulder, I'm a professor of distinction as well, which is quite an honor, but that's like too much to say in one title, I'm really lucky here at CU because we have a big like comic book initiative here. And we have a lot of faculty who are really into comic books. And we have lunches. We just had lunch with Alison Bechdel, which was pretty amazing. And it's really cool. I remember even 20 years ago, when I first started teaching, comic books were forbidden. You couldn't even talk about comic books in the classroom. But now they're the academy is understanding that this stuff is viable to study. It's not just trash.
It's surprising. It only takes a few Hollywood blockbusters and to get people to go, oh, comic books can't be taken seriously. There's money in it now.
Yeah. Well, when I teach comic books, it's usually a lecture course, like 120 faces out there, and I teach it as a close reading course. So I could really be using Shakespeare, I could be using contemporary novels, I could be using anything. I just choose comics because it's fun I like to put comics on the screen and talk about one page for 45 minutes. That's what I love to do more than anything.
And the thing interesting about diving into the world of comic books, because for the most part, still high school doesn't really teach it, junior high obviously doesn't teach it. So you are potentially the introduction or the foray into the world of comics as an academic. So where the hell do you start? You have so many great writers, so many great characters.
Yeah. And you can't cover everything. That's the trick, and
right.
And this comic book lecture is the way I've done it. It's more or less a survey, so I'm not like doing just horror comics or just Image or anything like that. I'm trying to give people who don't know comic books a taste of the whole comic book world, but you're right. I did learn after doing this course one or two times that I had to devote the very first day of class to teaching people how to navigate a comic book page because they didn't know it's top to bottom, left to right, and the dialogue balloons work. Everything works like that, top to bottom, left to right. And I had to teach that. And because I had a lot of people come to me after class and saying, I don't know where to start. And that blows me away because I've been reading them since I was 12, but I wouldn't, if I hadn't, then I would have no idea where to start either, so, and with some of the dynamic layouts that today's artists and creators are doing, it can be a little tricky to figure out where's your access point,
I must admit, I'm a high school English teacher,
Yep.
and I introduced I'm a comic book nerd myself, so I introduced comic books into my class because we did a on epic heroes, and my whole argument with us is that the same heroes of like Odysseus and stuff like that is the same as Batman thing, that basic argument. And I
Yeah.
was trying to teach them to do comic books, and I was shocked when they're like, I don't know how to read this. I was like, because
Yeah.
it was so fundamental to me because my father read comic books, I read comic books since I can remember. I was like,
Yeah.
people don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you get on an airplane and you're in the emergency row and you read the exit guidelines or whatever, that's usually like 6 or 8 panels, and it's laid out like a comic book with little
Yes.
captions and stuff, and that kind of presupposes that we all know how to move across that visual page, and maybe we do, and but I do. I'm glad you're doing that. I'm glad you're starting the kids out with comic books. I'm really thrilled too, and this probably started about for me 25 years ago. Libraries started really circulating comic books
Mm.
once all the trades started happening, and this stuff could stand up on a bookshelf, and it was durable enough to be checked out hundreds and hundreds of times. Then libraries started building their comic books collection, and that's where so many people have been getting their comic books. I feel like that's where, like, in the late 90s, I was way too broke to have a weekly bag at my store, and so I was living on the library shelf. And I'm always like 6 months behind, but I'd rather be 6 months behind than not get it at all.
Exactly. And and I really do believe, I know the 40s are considered the golden age, but I think we live now in the golden age of comic books. It's the greatest time to be a geek.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's whatever you're into, it's out there.
Yeah, in multiple different formats: movies, TV, comic books. They're all out there right now. Novels.
And there's even like audio dramatizations of comic books, which is
Yeah, it is a wonderful time. Like I said, if I told myself at 12 what was going to be like in my future, I'd be like, holy shit, Ant-Man
yeah.
has a trilogy. What the hell is going on in that future of yours? So I read a fascinating quote about you, and let's see. I want you to respond. So
Yeah.
it was in the Daily Camera, or I guess the name of the paper. It's an article referred to as the Jordan Peele of horror literature.
Oh, yeah.
So what does that exactly mean to you, and why is horror, do you think, a great vector for expressing social commentary?
Um, yeah, I think that showed up in Entertainment Weekly first for the Only Good Indians. They called me that, and it's a huge honor. But it came out at a time when Get Out was like still super hot in the world. And I mean, I'm not saying it's really lost its heat. It's still an amazing movie, amazingly done movie too. But I think when people say that, what they're saying is I'm both engaging the genre elements as I'm supposed to. If I'm to write horror, science fiction, fantasy, then it has to be horror, science fiction, or fantasy, or whatever it is. But at the same time, I'm kind of finding little cracks and wedges to either extract or push through social commentary of some sort. I'm just, and I tell you the truth, it's not like I mean to. I think what I tell my students is we've all got our axes to grind, and if you're honest with yourself when you're writing, then those axes are going to show. We've all got our prejudices, we've all got our angers, we've all got our things that we're tired of seeing, we've all got our things we want to change, and as long as we don't like throttle ourselves down too much, that's going to find its way to the page, I feel like. But your first job is to entertain. You got to tell a gripping story in the first place.
I agree that I always say there's no such thing as non-political art, because if you have anything worth saying, it's going to show up in what you write.
It totally is. It totally is. Yeah, I heard somebody the other day say, everything you do is political, but art is not supposed to be polemical. And I think I like that. That makes sense.
I totally get that. So when you're approaching a work, either your huge list of novels or the comic books that you're working on, graphic novels, when you're approaching it, you obviously want, like you said, you guys stick to the genre. How do you fit in the commentary in which, without, once again, you got to be careful, can't be heavy-handed with it, or you can turn people off, but you can't
Yeah.
make it so vague that people don't get what you're trying to say. How do
Yeah.
you work? How do you thread that needle?
I guess I thread it by not having a system of check boxes I have to tick off as I go. Like with Earthdivers, say, I knew that I wanted to. The premise is time travelers go back in time to kill Columbus to stop America from happening to save the world. And so I had to mess with the mechanics and the ethics of time travel, of course. But within that like framework or within that premise or that situation, yeah, I'm able to show or talk about or have the characters mention how sick they are of the treatment of indigenous people in the world, or the just the bad history, all the terrible stuff that's happened. But again, if I like that ever goes like 3 pages, then I think I'm failing. It has to be like one line here and then one line 12 pages later.
So Earthdivers, might as well jump into that story. It's a fantastic story about time travel, in which the main character, Tad, has gone back in time through means of time travel to kill Christopher Columbus in order to stop, I guess, a future apocalypse.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's break that down a little bit. So first off, why Columbus?
Um, it probably for me starts in elementary school, fourth grade or so, when I'm in my history class and I'm hearing about what a hero and a discoverer and an amazing person Christopher Columbus was. And I'm in the back, a Blackfeet kid, and I'm back in the classroom and I'm thinking, that this dude who opened the doors for smallpox and slavery and genocide and all this terrible stuff, this is our hero. And so I think that's probably the inception point for me. It was just a lifetime of getting tired of that. And but to tell you the truth, I think if you go to the street and ask 15 indigenous people, then I think 14 of them are going to say of who they want to take down. If they had if they could just like snap their fingers like Thanos and erase somebody, Christopher Columbus is going to be really high on that list. Christopher Columbus, Custer is probably going to be right under there.
So when you're conceptualizing how you're going to write his character, we'll get into the others as well, but let's go to Columbus first. How do you approach it? Is he, in your opinion, I mean, once again, we all know the history, we all know the horrible things that he did. Do you write him as someone who's inherently evil? Do you write him as someone who some audience will view him as the initial hero of legend? Or do you walk into it and decide, just how do you approach him as a person?
Oh, that's a really good question. The easy thing to do would be to make him pretty vile, to make him like twisting his mustache the whole way across the Atlantic and thinking I'm going to do evil stuff when I get there. But that to me is not an interesting story. The interesting story to me is if he thinks he is he is the hero. He's making good decisions. He's doing this for good reasons. And that's a lot more interesting to me. And hopefully I can make him a little bit charismatic and I can show kind of the crux he's in, because he's the captain of this little armada, these 3 ships. And so he has to make decisions which keeps the crew from mutinying against him. He has to make decisions which keep them moving ahead. He has to like tell lies to his crew about where they are and how far they are in order to keep them pacified. And so he's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders, and he's still looking at the horizon. So yeah, I didn't want to draw him as evil, but I think we all know who he is and we know what he's going to do once he lands over here, so I think that's probably that fills him in enough already.
So is the bigger problem from the point of view of our protagonist, Tad, is it the journey or the arrival that's the bigger problem?
The big problem for Tad to me, and this is what I put in my pitch when I was initially talking to IDW, is that he is not a soldier, he is a scholar. And the reason he has been sent, the reason of his little crew, he was the one elected to go back in time. It was as simple as 2 things. Number one, he's the only person with enough languages that he can probably somehow pass, because there's going to be a lot of languages in these ports and on these ships. And number 2, he's male. In his crew, there's 2 women and 2 dudes. Is that right? Yeah, 2 women and 2 dudes. And as a woman, it's going to be really tricky to get on as a crewman on a expedition like this. So it had to be a male and it had to be somebody who knew languages. So he was the only one it could be, but at the same time, he's not a killer, really. He's not comfortable with it. He would much rather be studying moldering old textbooks than carrying a knife and doing bad things.
I think one interesting aspect of the story, for listeners who may or may not have read the first 2 issues, is that Tad has the opportunity to kill Columbus, and initially doesn't, though he has killed 1 person up to that point already. Why? What is the hesitation? Is it the consequences of doing it that he's concerned about, or is he still hesitant of killing any individual?
I think in that first issue he does kill someone, and I think that lands real heavy. That's really weighing on him. He's like, I took a life, and so I think in issue 2, when he does hesitate, there is a moment where I'm not sure if he could have killed Columbus, but he could have attempted to kill Columbus anyways. He doesn't take that opportunity, and I think the hesitation is both because of what he just did. He just killed somebody, and also um, that he doesn't have that kind of training. He it's still new to him. This whole being a killer thing.
Now, one interesting thing about Tad's situation right now, unlike a lot of time travel stories, where let's say, for instance, Back to the Future, he goes back in time, but the idea is that he goes back in time, but he's also going to go return to the present. Tad, from my understanding, is there is no going back for him. Once he does whatever he's going to do, he's on this ship. He's going to kill potentially Columbus. He's still going to be stuck forever in that timeline, that time period.
Yeah.
What does that mean for him, knowing that for unlike maybe a lot of time travelers who could maybe do their thing and then run away, there's going to be consequences no matter what the hell he does.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So,
it's like I mean, to tell you the truth, this probably is a result of me being so infected with Terminator and Terminator 2, when I was growing up, because Reese comes back and he knows it's a one-way trip. He's basically sacrificing himself for the future, which is what Tad is attempting to do as well. But to me, it's so difficult to go back in time that the idea of going forward in time just boggles my mind. I can't imagine. I mean, it's hard to imagine going back in time in the first place, I know, but the going forward in time, I don't know, it feels like a get out of jail free card, I guess. And I also think that if he completes his mission in issue 3, then his next duty is to erase himself from the timeline. He can't go have a life and have kids and all that stuff. That's going to mess things up, maybe even worse.
Well, an interesting aspect too is that there's a character in his present time, Sosh or Sash.
Sash.
Sash. Now she's to understand she's the girlfriend or the wife of Ted.
Yeah, she's his wife. Yeah.
So she knows he went back in time. For her, mentally or emotionally, is Ted then dead to her mind?
Yeah, and she's having a hard time wrapping her mind around that, because the instant he goes through that portal to go back in time, that means he died 600 odd years ago, and she knows there's no chance of seeing him again. But they both see the world crumbling around them enough that they know that their days are numbered anyways, and so this way they can spend their lives in a way that maybe helps everybody else. But yeah, no, she's having a hard time with it for sure.
I mean, it must be so weird because you don't really have that same kind of idea of closure. There's not like a dead body in front of you. And I guess on some level, I was trying to think in my head how to like verbalize it. In some way, Tad is definitely dead because it was 600 years ago. But at the same time, part of me is thinking, well, he's at that moment, she's thinking that he's alive because he's kind of actually doing something in the past. So I was like, how the hell does she even mentally handle that concept? Is alive, or is you view him as dead at that moment?
Yeah, no. Yeah, if she finally sees him in a history book, then I think that'll like serve as a headstone for her, anyways. A little bit. Yeah.
So another interesting aspect of the story is that it seems like once again, Tad goes back. He's violating the time stream. It seems to me that nature isn't thrilled with it.
Yeah.
Now, how does one view that? Is nature itself trying to prevent the timeline from being affected, or if you can view it in that way, is time wanting it to play out the way it did?
My feeling is that it's like Tad and Yellow Kid, they talk about history and time as if it has intentions. I think it's really just like really dull like physics rules, it messes up the mass of each moment. If Tad goes back from 2112 to 1492, then there's suddenly 180 extra pounds in 1492. And how does just with equations and formulas and math, how does the world and gravity account for that? And so I don't think time necessarily wants this or that outcome. Time just wants things not to change, because that is pushing against the rules that are keeping everything contained and happy.
So are Tad's actions, because obviously what we know based on the story, the whole idea is that killing Columbus, you can save the future. But is it also possible that what he's doing in the past is actually more dangerous to the future?
Definitely. Yeah, and they talk about that in 2 or 3, if I remember correctly, that how do you know that killing Columbus doesn't allow, a worse Columbus to suddenly rise up from the world and do terrible, even terribler things, you know? So yeah, we don't have, you never know. Like you, it's like that, what do they call it? The Delicate Sound of Thunder, that old story that where somebody goes back in time and steps on a butterfly
Oh,
and that,
butterfly effect, yeah.
yeah, that changes everything, you know? Yeah.
So that's a lot of responsibility for Ted, a regular guy, to take on from themselves. I mean, it's not just potentially murder that he has to carry the weight of, but his entire future that he could be literally unraveling as he goes along.
Yeah, for sure. And it I mean, I guess Philip K. Dick, he does something similar. He has a story where at the very front of the story, a time traveler is given a skull, and he's like, in the, I think his impetus, they tell him go figure out what's up with his skull, and so he goes back in time, and if I remember correctly, it turns out to be his skull, so it's like a big loop, you know. And La Jetée, that movie, that little short film, that French short film that 28 is it 28 Monkeys is based on, it does the same thing, you know. And yeah, like we all think that we can go back in time and mess with things just enough to make things better now, but I think that's hubris. I mean, I think anything we do, like you were talking about the butterfly effect, like a butterfly flaps its wings off of Chile, and we get a hurricane in Virginia. You know, I think I think chaos theory almost demands that the littlest things you do in the past are going to have huge effects once it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs through the centuries.
So, what the characters that are in the, I'm trying to think of how you would prefer. Is Soch then the present? I guess you would call Soch then Sasha living in the present, and Tad's the past. I'm just trying to figure out the best terminology for because the stories exist in two periods.
Yeah.
How aware are they going to be of things changing?
How are they going to be aware of things changing?
Um, how aware will they be? Like, are they going to
Yeah.
change with the change, or
Oh, because Sash and Emily and Yellow Kid were all right there in the cave when Tad went through. They were kind of in a bubble that protected them from the way everything else was changing because they're out in the desert where there's not like skyscrapers and bridges and stuff. Then the changes that have been that are impacting their present are not immediately observable, you know? And so they have to hike out and like find some sort of text or something that will show them, did Ted succeed? And if he succeeded, did that change anything, you know?
So one interesting thing that was brought up by a yellow kidney, she mentions that it's possible to deal with this change in time. The universe would create itself a pocket universe to deal with the possible change to the timeline. Now, does that render all Ted with all everything Ted is doing as pointless? How do we know if that is what happened? And like, at what point do we know that he just make a pocket world, or is this the impact?
Yeah, no, I think if he does drop back into a pocket world, it's sort of a safety device that the universe has come up with, you know, to keep him from messing with, from creating a paradox. Then yeah, I think that he would not be impacting Sasha's world, but he would be changing that world, you know, because that pocket universe would keep on going. I feel like it wouldn't just stop after 5 years. And so yeah, maybe he goes back and gets a submarine and blows up the three, you know, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria or something. And in that, if he is in a pocket universe, that would change that pocket universe's future. And for him, that would be the real future. He would never know the difference, of course.
Time travel is so complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is then potentially Sash and Yellow Kitty going to end up? I mean, is it some point there's a version of them that would also be in the pocket universe then if this occurs, or are they always going to end up in the universe timeline that they start off at?
I would hope they always end up in the what we can call the main or the real world, you know, not a splinter universe or anything like that. Just because like we've all read stories where somebody does an experiment and reality branches and somebody goes to a parallel world, and the stakes in those parallel worlds, they always feel lower because we as readers, as an audience, are no longer as invested because we're like, that's them over there, not us, you know.
Hmm.
And so I hope that they stay in the main thoroughfare.
So another interesting that occurs in the story, in issue two, without giving away too many spoilers, it ends in an interesting cliffhanger on the very last page, which is very surprising to Sash and Yellow Kitty. I'm trying to get a sense of where that comes out of.
Yeah. I mean, my idea is that matter has a hard time swimming upstream to the future, but things that are incorporeal, they can go anywhere. That's my feeling. They're not as constrained by gravity and physics. They're more constrained. Their only limitation is it's almost like justice. Like, what do they need to do?
Mm. Well, another interesting thing is too is, in the first issue you introduced the concept that's the people, I assume the powerful and wealthy, get on a ship and get the hell out of it.
Yeah.
A couple of things on that. First, are we going to revisit what happens to them? And two, are they still confined to the change in the timeline that Tad is potentially creating for them?
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think they will if Tad makes it where spacefaring technology doesn't develop in time for them to have blasted off, then they'll be stranded on Earth and they won't be able to escape. But if he also fixes things, they won't have a need to escape because the Earth will be fine and dandy. So I think as far away as they get, it I think they're still within the like purview of Tad's historical changes.
Now, are we rooting for them to have to find that they can't leave in time? Like, I must admit, it kind of sucks that they're just like, sorry, we're out of here. Sorry, bitches.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm probably not rooting for them because they are the one percenters who they're the ones basically who have used up the Earth's resources and made everything collapse. And so now that the place is used up, they're like, let's jet off to a new place and
Yeah.
leave the people who don't have the money for a seat on this ship, this transport. They got to stay here and clean up the mess. So I'm not rooting for them. I don't think.
Are we going? But are we going to revisit them and what's going on? What happened to them?
I haven't written anything revisiting them yet, but it may yet happen. Yes, yes, because we're doing 3 arcs with Earthdivers, 3 arcs of 6. But between those arcs, there are one shots. There's little kind of side room stories, if that makes sense.
So, can you give some hints of what those side stories are going to be? We're going to cover.
You know, um, yeah. Well, can I give hints? Let me think. Other historical periods will be visited. That's probably what I can say. Yeah.
So the other thing that's kind of interesting is that you kind of hint out what the apocalypse event probably is. Can you kind of give a little more detail on what probably happened?
I mean, it's basically we dredged up all these rare elements to build cell phones from, and they poison the world. I mean, it's a large version of that. And we were kind of heedless. We were like, this is going to last forever, but I don't think that's the right way to think about the ecosphere. I think we need to think about it such that we have to take care of it, and we have to like work with it instead of just utilize it. So yeah, I don't think that there was like Armageddon, nuclear war, or anything like that. I think it was just like the ozone fell apart, it quit raining, all that kind of stuff.
So another interesting thing that I was thinking about, because the great thing about your series is that it had me thinking a lot, which is always the cornerstone of a great work.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And the one thing I was thinking about is obviously the issue is Columbus gets killed. He doesn't discover America. So a question that kind of came to me the last time I was reading, I don't know if you read Ishmael, Story of B from Daniel Quinn. They're very fascinating books, but anthropological based books. It's called Ishmael, My Ishmael, and the Story of B, which kind of covers the direction. It's basically from a point of view of a gorilla who can telepathically discuss it from his perspective. It's very interesting. If you're ever in the anthropology department, everyone has read it in that department. And one question that always occurred when I was reading it is, can progress or whatever occurs be stopped? So let's say Columbus is taken out.
Mm-hmm.
Europe is still standing. The people who set everything in motion with Columbus is still standing. Will that eventually have occur anyway?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Will Isabella send another explorer across the Atlantic, or will Portugal send somebody? Will some other nation state or whatever do that? I suspect so, yes. But what I really like is let's see, what's his name? Orson Scott Card. He has that book Past Watch. I don't know if you've read that. And in Past Watch, it's also about going back in time to mess with the Columbus's story. In that one, the indigenous people of the Americas have enough time, because not the bad stuff doesn't happen. They have enough time to like build a whole fleet, and they go to the Mediterranean instead of Europe coming to us, which is really pretty cool. I love that. I love those ships sailing into those harbors.
Yeah.
So cool. And I think Rebecca Roanhorse has a trilogy she's doing now. The first book is Black Sun, the second one is Fevered Star, and it's a fantasy. It's a second world fantasy, and I think that her civilization she has created there has potential to roll across the ocean as well and do some stuff. Maybe not. Hopefully, not be imperialistic, but meet on our own terms. That's really what we want, is to meet on our own terms.
I really thought it was a fascinating series that you created. I really enjoyed reading the first two issues. Oh, totally. And like I said, it's published by IDW, available in Diamond. So is this going to be every month with a break in between, or are we looking at
No, it's going to be every month, and those one shots that come between the arcs are going to fill in for the months that there's not a main arc.
Well, like I said, I thought it was absolutely fantastic, sir, and I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. It was a joy to talk with you.
Man, it was so much fun. I can talk time travel forever. Thank you.
Well, like I said, when the next arc comes around, you're always welcome to come back and talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you later, man.